The fall of Proxima Dawn. The skies above Proxima Dawn turned blood red as the first wave of Siren warships broke through the atmosphere. For generations, this colony had been humanity's shining achievement, a testament to peace and ingenuity. Fields of azure wheat stretched across the valleys. Cities gleamed with crystal spires that caught the light of twin suns, and children played in parks beneath artificial waterfalls that cascaded down the sides of living buildings. No one thought war would ever touch this paradise. Commander Ilara Reeves stood on the command deck of Proxima Dawn's modest defense station, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. The holographic displays around her showed multiple Siren warships, sleek, obsidian vessels that moved with predatory grace, breaking formation and positioning themselves above major population centers. "They're not even hailing us," Lieutenant Chen whispered beside her. "Not demanding surrender or resources. Nothing." Ilara's jaw tightened. "Because they're not here to negotiate." The first bombardment hit the northern agricultural district, a flash of sickly green energy that carved through farms and processing centers like a scythe. The station shuddered as sensors registered the blast wave. Emergency alerts flooded every channel, civilian and military alike. "Evacuation protocols. Now," Ilara barked, snapping her officers out of their shocked stupor. "Get everyone to the southern shelters and prep all available transports. I want civilians off-world within the hour." Reports streamed in from other colonies across human space. Galileo's Rest, Terra Nova, New Sydney, all under simultaneous attack. This wasn't a border skirmish or resource raid. The Siren Dominion had launched a coordinated extermination campaign against humanity's outer worlds. Ilara led her small contingent of defense forces into the chaos that had once been Proxima Dawn's capital city. Buildings burned around them, smoke turning the artificial blue sky into a haze of ash and debris. Civilians ran in panic while emergency workers struggled to direct them toward evacuation points. "Commander," a sergeant rushed up to her, his armor scorched and cracked. "Siren ground forces are deploying in the eastern sector. They're moving methodically, building by building, not taking prisoners." Ilara had spent 15 years in Earth's defense forces before taking this posting. She'd seen combat in 3 systems, but nothing prepared her for the cold efficiency of the Siren troops as they advanced through Proxima's streets. They moved like a plague of insects, their chitinous exoskeletons augmented with technological enhancements that made them nearly impossible to kill with standard weapons. Her forces set up a defensive perimeter around the main evacuation site, where thousands of civilians huddled in terror as shuttles lifted off one after another. They were buying time with their lives, and everyone knew it. "Where the hell is Earth?" Lieutenant Chen muttered as they took cover behind a fallen statue. "The distress signals went out an hour ago. The fleet should have responded by now." Ilara reloaded her pulse rifle, not answering immediately. Earth had been changing in recent years. After the first contact with the Siren Dominion decades ago, there had been whispers of secret military programs, of resources diverted to classified projects that even colony commanders weren't briefed on. "They'll come," she finally said, more from duty than conviction. The Siren advance guard reached the outer edge of their perimeter by midday. The alien soldiers moved with unnerving coordination, their weapons firing bursts of plasma that melted through barricades and armor alike. Ilara's forces held as best they could, but they were outmatched in both numbers and technology. Chen took a plasma burst to the shoulder, the energy burning through his armor and searing flesh beneath. Ilara dragged him behind cover, injecting a combat stim to keep him conscious. "We can't hold them," he gasped, face pale with shock. "Not like this." The ground beneath them suddenly trembled. At first, Ilara thought it was another bombardment from the Siren ships above. But this was different, rhythmic, like massive footsteps. The vibrations grew stronger, and even the advancing Siren troops paused, their multifaceted eyes turning toward the source. From behind the human lines, enormous shadows appeared through the smoke. At first, they seemed like walking tanks, But as they emerged into view, Ilara realized she was looking at humans, or at least beings that had once been human. They stood nearly 20 feet tall, clad in armor so thick it would have crushed a normal person. Their proportions were perfect, not simply enlarged humans, but redesigned from the molecular level up to support their massive size. Each carried weapons that would normally be mounted on vehicles: rotary cannons, plasma lances, gravity hammers that crackled with contained energy. The giants moved with purpose, their steps shaking the ground. The lead figure, a woman with dark skin and eyes that glowed with augmented targeting systems, pointed toward the Siren forces. Colossus Squadron, engage. Her voice boomed across the battlefield, amplified and commanding. Protect the evacuation site. No mercy for those who target civilians. The giants surged forward with shocking speed for beings of their size. The first reached the Siren lines and swung a gravity hammer that dispersed a shockwave so powerful it sent a dozen alien soldiers flying like leaves in a hurricane. Another giant unleashed a barrage from twin rotary cannons that tore through the Siren ranks with devastating precision. Ilara stared in disbelief. These weren't just soldiers, they were walking fortresses. Earth had created its own monsters to counter the alien threat. Colossus Project, Chen whispered beside her, recognition dawning in his pain-glazed eyes. The rumors were true. Ilara had heard the stories too. A classified program to create super soldiers capable of facing alien threats that outmatched conventional human forces. But she dismissed them as propaganda, as wishful thinking. Yet here they were, turning the tide of a battle that had seemed hopeless moments before. The Siren forces regrouped quickly, redirecting their heavier weapons toward the giants. Energy beams that would have vaporized normal soldiers merely scorched the Colossus armor. One giant took a direct hit to the chest, staggering back momentarily before charging forward again, roaring with fury that seemed to shake the very air. All defense units, Ilara ordered into her comm, finding new resolve, rally behind the Colossus squad. Create a protective corridor to the evacuation sites. We're going to get our people out. The giants weren't just fighting. They were sending a message. Each crushed Siren soldier, each destroyed enemy vehicle, was a declaration. Humanity would not fall easily, would not be exterminated without extracting a terrible price. As the battle raged, the civilian evacuation gained momentum. Transport ships, once sitting ducks for the Siren fleet, now departed protected by a new squadron of Earth vessels that had arrived alongside the Colossus deployment. These weren't the usual defense cruisers. They were something new, built specifically to counter Siren technology. The lead giant, the woman with glowing eyes whom the others called Athena, strode through the battlefield like a force of nature. Her gravity hammer swung in wide arcs that cleared entire streets of enemy forces. When a Siren heavy assault vehicle attempted to flank the evacuation site, she intercepted it, grabbing its cannon barrel with her free hand and wrenching it upward. The vehicle fired helplessly into the sky as she brought her hammer down on its main body, crushing it into the pavement. Commander Reeves, Athena's voice came through Ilara's comm channel, surprisingly human despite its volume. Earth Command sends apologies for the delayed response. The Colossus Squadron is under your tactical direction for the duration of the evacuation. Ilara almost laughed at the absurdity. These walking engines of destruction, following her orders. Acknowledged, Colossus Athena, she replied, professionalism overcoming her shock. Priority is civilian extraction. Secondary objective, secure data cores from the Colonial Archive. The Sirens can't be allowed to access our colony network. Understood. The giant nodded, her massive helmet turning toward the Colonial Administration building in the distance. Colossus Ajax, Colossus Hector, secure the archive. The rest of us will hold here. Two giants broke from the formation, moving with purpose toward the colony's heart. Siren soldiers that attempted to intercept them were batted aside like insects. As the battle progressed, Ilara witnessed the full capabilities of Earth's secret weapons. These weren't mindless brutes. They fought with strategy and precision that spoke of extensive training and augmented intelligence. When Siren air support arrived, one giant, Colossus Orion, according to comm chatter, deployed shoulder-mounted missile arrays that tracked and destroyed enemy craft with unerring accuracy. By nightfall, the evacuation was 70% complete. The remaining civilians huddled in the last defensive zone, watching in awe as Titans fought for their survival. Children who had been crying in terror now stared wide-eyed as giants stood between them and extinction. "They're bringing in something big," Lieutenant Chen warned, monitoring sensor readings from their makeshift command post. His wound had been treated, but he remained pale. Atmospheric disturbance suggests a capital ship descending. Ilara looked up at the darkening sky, where the clouds parted to reveal an enormous Siren vessel, at least 3 times the size of the previous warships. Its shape reminded her of a mantis poised to strike. "They're not giving up," she murmured. "Not even after this." Athena appeared beside their position, her massive form kneeling to bring her head closer to their level. Despite the battle raging around them, her voice was calm and determined. "The last transports need 20 more minutes to load and launch," she said. "We'll give them those minutes, whatever it takes." As the Siren capital ship positioned itself above the battlefield, Ilara realized what was about to happen. "They're going to glass the entire colony," she said, horror filling her voice. "They can't beat us on the ground, so they'll destroy everything from orbit." Athena stood to her full height, staring up at the enemy vessel. "Not if we take the fight to them first." The giant raised her hand, signaling to her squad. The other Colossus soldiers gathered, forming a circle as if in conference. Then, to Ilara's amazement, sections of their massive armor began to reconfigure, components shifting and locking together. "What are they doing?" Chen asked, watching in disbelief. Ilara had no answer, but as the giants worked with practiced efficiency, she began to understand. They were assembling something, a weapon too large for even them to carry individually. When they finished, Athena stood holding what appeared to be a massive anti-orbital cannon, its power core glowing with ominous energy. "Clear the area," she commanded, and both soldiers and civilians scrambled to comply. Athena planted her feet, the other giants bracing her position as she aimed the weapon skyward. The cannon hummed, vibrating the air around it as energy built to levels that made sensors overload and shut down. When she fired, the world turned white. A column of pure energy, as thick as a building, shot upward and struck the Siren capital ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the vessel's shields flickered and failed, and the beam punched through its armored hull. The explosion that followed lit up the night sky like a newborn sun. Debris rained down, but the giants positioned themselves over the evacuation zone, their massive bodies and shields protecting the remaining civilians from the falling wreckage. As the final transports prepared for departure, Ilara found herself standing beside Athena once more. "Earth knew," she said, not a question but an accusation. "Earth knew the Sirens were planning this attack." The giant was silent for a moment before answering. "Not the timing, not the targets, but the intent. Yes, we've been preparing for this day for 15 years. Ilara looked around at the burning remains of Proxima Dawn, at homes destroyed, lives shattered, a colony that would never recover. "And you didn't warn us, didn't evacuate civilians beforehand." "Politics," Athena said, the single word heavy with frustration. The colonial parliament wouldn't authorize mass evacuations based on classified intelligence. They feared panic, economic collapse. "And now we have actual collapse," Ilara said bitterly. Athena's massive hand gestured toward the departing ships. "But not extinction. Humanity survives, Commander. And now, the Sirens know what awaits them if they continue this war." As Ilara boarded the final transport, she looked back at the giants standing amid the ruins of humanity's greatest colony. They weren't retreating. They were waiting, weapons ready, for the next wave of enemies. The message was clear. If you come for humanity's children, Humanity will send its monsters after you. Titans unleashed. The evacuation fleet from Proxima Dawn limped through space, a convoy of civilian transports and damaged military vessels carrying the survivors of humanity's fallen paradise. Commander Ilara Reeves stood on the bridge of the command shuttle, watching the holographic displays that showed the status of 23 other colonies under attack. 12 had been completely destroyed. 8 were in the midst of evacuation, protected by hastily deployed Colossus squadrons. 3 were holding barely. Status report on Proxima survivors, she demanded, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. Lieutenant Chen, his shoulder now properly treated by the medical staff, looked up from his console. 87,000 civilians evacuated, Commander. Approximately 40% of the colony's population. The unspoken truth hung in the air. 60% hadn't made it. Over 100,000 souls lost in a single day of violence. Ilara closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself one moment of grief before returning to duty. Any word from Earth Command? Coming through now, Chen replied, his fingers moving across the holographic interface. They're redirecting us. We're not heading to the inner colonies. They want all survivors to rendezvous at Fortress Alpha. Ilara frowned. Fortress Alpha was a military installation, not a refugee center. A massive space station hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It had been built secretly over the past decade, its purpose classified beyond her security clearance. What about the Colossus squad we left behind? She asked. Chen's expression was grim. No extraction planned. They're to continue engaging enemy forces until... He didn't finish the sentence. Until they fall. Until they're overwhelmed. The giants had been left behind as a sacrificial rear guard, buying time for the evacuation fleet with their lives. Or so Earth Command thought. 12 hours later, as the refugee fleet approached the coordinates for Fortress Alpha, proximity alarms blared across the bridge. Chen's hands flew across his console. Multiple vessels approaching at high speed, he announced. Configuration unknown. Ilara's heart raced. Had the sirens followed them? Were they about to finish what they started at Proxima Dawn? On screen, she ordered, bracing herself for the worst. The main display flickered to life, showing not siren warships, but something entirely different. Massive, sleek vessels unlike anything in Earth's fleet. They moved with impossible speed for their size, overtaking the refugee convoy within minutes. They're hailing us, Chen said, confusion evident in his voice. When the communication channel opened, Ilara found herself staring at the face of Athena, the leader of the Colossus squad she'd left behind on Proxima Dawn. Despite the battle they'd fought together, this was the first time Ilara had seen the giant's face clearly. Athena's dark skin was marked with fine lines of circuitry that pulsed with subtle light, and her eyes shimmered with the same augmented targeting systems Ilara had glimpsed on the battlefield. Commander Reeves, Athena said, her voice no longer amplified by battlefield speakers, but still resonant with authority. Your civilians are safe. We've cleared the path to Fortress Alpha of all Siren Scouts. Ilara struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. But you were on Proxima. How did you? Our mission changed when we detected the Siren fleet mobilizing for pursuit, Athena explained. We have our own vessels, Commander. The Titans are not merely ground forces. As if to emphasize this point, the view widened to show the bridge of Athena's ship. It was scaled for the giants, with control systems designed for hands larger than a normal human's head. Behind her stood other members of the Colossus squad, their armor now integrated with their vessel's systems. The Sirens have deployed their main fleet, Athena continued. They're moving against all human colonies simultaneously, and they've launched a strike force toward Earth itself. Fortress Alpha is preparing for war, Commander. Your refugees will be safe there while we take the fight back to the enemy. The feed cut out as suddenly as it had appeared, and the massive ships accelerated away, leaving the refugee fleet to continue its journey to safety. Fortress Alpha lived up to its name. As they approached, Ilara stared in awe at what had been hidden from the colonial governments. A massive military installation built into and around a captured asteroid, bristling with weapon systems and surrounded by a fleet of warships unlike any she'd seen before. These weren't the standard Earth Defense Force vessels. They were new, designed specifically for the conflict that Earth had apparently been preparing for in secret. After docking, Ilara was immediately summoned to the station's command center. She walked through corridors filled with military personnel and advanced technology, noting the insignia many wore, a stylized depiction of a human figure towering over a planetary surface. The Colossus project wasn't just a squad, it was an entire division, with support staff and infrastructure to match. Admiral Xavier Thorne waited for her in the command center, a stern man with cybernetic implants visible at his temples. His uniform bore the same Colossus insignia, though he himself was of normal human size. "Commander Reeves," he greeted her formally. "Your actions at Proxima Dawn saved thousands of lives. Earth Command commends your service." Ilara wasn't interested in commendations. "You knew this was coming," she accused. "You built all of this," she gestured around her, "while letting our colonies remain vulnerable." Thorne's expression didn't change. "Politics, Commander." The colonial parliament refused to believe the Siren threat was existential. They called our intelligence reports warmongering and cut military budgets in favor of expansion. We did what we could within the constraints imposed on us, which included creating 20-foot-tall super soldiers, Ilara asked incredulously. "The Colossus program began 15 years ago, after the first Siren diplomatic delegation," Thorne explained, activating a holographic display that showed the development timeline. "Our scientists determined that conventional forces would be inadequate against Siren physiology and technology. We needed a quantum leap, not just better weapons, but better warriors." The display showed the evolution of the Colossus soldiers, first as theoretical models, then prototypes, and finally the finished versions Ilara had seen in battle. "They're not just big, Commander," Thorne continued. "Every aspect of their biology has been enhanced. Strength, speed, intelligence, endurance, all scaled up beyond normal human limitations. Their armor and weapons are integrated with their nervous systems. They can process battlefield information faster than our most advanced AIs." Ilara studied the schematics, noticing something. "They're not. They weren't born this way, were they?" Thorne's hesitation answered her question before his words did. "No. The Colossus soldiers are volunteers, special forces operators who underwent extensive modification. The process is challenging. Not everyone survives it." Before Ilara could process the implications, alarms blared throughout the station. A junior officer rushed to Thorne's side. "Admiral, Siren forces have broken through the outer system defenses. They'll reach Mars orbit within 2 hours." Thorne turned to the main tactical display, his expression hardening. "Deploy all Titan-class vessels. Prepare orbital platforms for maximum yield. This ends today." Ilara found herself included in the station's war council, her experience with the Sirens at Proxima Dawn suddenly valuable. The tactical displays showed the approaching Siren armada, hundreds of vessels converging on Earth's solar system in a wave of destruction. "They're not just striking military targets," she observed, studying their formation. "Their deployment is optimized for planetary bombardment. They intend to render Earth uninhabitable, just as they did to your colony." Thorne agreed grimly. "But we're ready for them this time." The defense of humanity's home system unfolded before Ilara's eyes. Fortress Alpha deployed its fleet, dozens of vessels designed specifically to counter Siren technology. At their center were 7 massive warships, each crewed entirely by Colossus soldiers. The Titan vessels moved with surprising grace for their size, engaging the front edge of the Siren fleet near the orbit of Mars. Energy weapons flashed across the void of space, and nuclear-tipped missiles bloomed like deadly flowers against the backdrop of the red planet. Athena's squadron is engaging the Siren flagship, reported a tactical officer, highlighting a particularly fierce battle on the main display. Ilara watched as the giant she had fought alongside at Proxima Dawn led her vessel directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The Titan ship absorbed punishment that would have destroyed a conventional vessel, its reinforced hull glowing red with absorbed energy, but holding firm. "They're going to be overwhelmed," Ilara said, counting the enemy vessels surrounding Athena's position. Admiral Thorne smiled thinly. "Watch." On the tactical display, the other Titan vessels suddenly changed course, converging on Athena's position from different vectors. What had appeared to be a desperate, perhaps suicidal charge transformed into an elaborate trap as the Titans executed a perfectly coordinated maneuver that encircled a significant portion of the Siren fleet. "Fire Prometheus," Thorne ordered. The tactical display briefly went white as all 7 Titan vessels simultaneously fired their main weapons, scaled-up versions of the anti-orbital cannon Athena had used on Proxima Dawn. The combined energy discharge created a web of destructive force that vaporized dozens of Siren warships caught in the crossfire. When the display cleared, a quarter of the Siren fleet was simply gone. The battle raged for hours, with the Titan vessels leading Earth's defense forces in a coordinated dance of destruction. The Sirens fought with the cold precision Ilara had witnessed on Proxima Dawn, but they were facing an enemy they hadn't prepared for, an enemy specifically designed to counter their advantages. As the Siren fleet began to falter, their flagship broke from formation and accelerated toward Earth, apparently intent on completing its mission even at the cost of its own destruction. "They're making a suicide run," Ilara warned, tracking its trajectory. "If that vessel impacts or detonates near a population center, Colossus Darius is moving to intercept," the tactical officer announced. On the display, one of the Titan vessels broke pursuit and changed course to match the Siren flagship. It was smaller than the alien vessel, but it accelerated with surprising speed, positioning itself directly in the flagship's path. "What are they doing?" Ilara asked. "They can't stop that ship through kinetic impact alone. It's too massive." Admiral Thorne watched grimly. "Darius knows what he's doing, Commander." As the 2 vessels approached each other on a collision course, the Titan ship suddenly began to change. Sections of its hull separated and reconfigured, components shifting with the same precision Ilara had witnessed when the giants assembled their anti-orbital cannon on Proxima Dawn. Within moments, the ship had transformed, unfolding into an enormous humanoid form, a Colossus soldier magnified to truly titanic proportions. "The Titan's final form," Thorne explained quietly. "For emergencies only. The vessel itself is an extension of their armor, capable of transforming into a combat mech that amplifies their abilities exponentially. But it burns through their power reserves in minutes. It's a last resort." The transformed vessel, now a colossal armored giant floating in space, braced itself in the path of the oncoming Siren flagship. As the alien vessel approached, Darius reached out with massive hands, grappling with the front section of the ship. The collision was catastrophic. Both entities tumbled through space, locked in a desperate struggle. Darius's mech form began to glow as it absorbed the kinetic energy of the impact, redirecting the flagship's momentum away from Earth's trajectory. "He's going to use their own mass driver against them," Ilara realized, watching as Darius positioned himself behind the Siren vessel, his mech's hands gripping the alien ship's propulsion section. With a final burst of power, Darius activated his mech's thrusters, accelerating both himself and the Siren flagship away from Earth on a vector that would send them plunging into the sun. The energy signature of both vessels began to fade as they accelerated beyond recovery range. "He's not coming back from that, is he?" Ilara asked softly. Thorne shook his head. "No, but he's saved millions, perhaps billions." With their flagship destroyed and their forces decimated, the remaining Siren vessels began to retreat, breaking off engagements and accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. Earth's defense fleet, led by the 6 remaining Titan vessels, pursued relentlessly, ensuring the alien armada couldn't regroup for another attack. In the aftermath, as the tactical displays cleared of combat indicators, Admiral Thorne turned to Ilara. "The Sirens have never been defeated like this before. They considered us easy prey, a species too dedicated to peace to properly defend itself. We proved them wrong," Ilara said, thinking of the colonies that had been lost, of Proxima Dawn's crystal spires now reduced to radioactive ash. "Yes, but at a terrible cost," Thorne acknowledged. "Now comes the hard part, rebuilding and deciding what kind of civilization we want to be in the aftermath of this war." 3 days later, Ilara stood in a vast hangar within Fortress Alpha, watching as the remaining Colossus soldiers returned from their pursuit of the Siren fleet. They disembarked from their vessels in full armor, towering over the normal humans who greeted them with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Athena spotted Ilara and approached, her heavy footsteps sending vibrations through the deck plating. She knelt to bring herself closer to eye level, the gesture somehow both intimidating and respectful. "Commander Reeves," she greeted, "I'm told you've been offered a position with the Colossus Command." Ilara nodded. "Admiral Thorne thinks my experience coordinating with your squad on Proxima Dawn could be valuable as we establish new defensive protocols for the remaining colonies." "And will you accept?" Athena asked. Ilara hesitated, looking up at the giant's face, at the human being who had sacrificed her normal existence to become something beyond human, all to protect her species. "I've seen what the Sirens are capable of," she finally said, "and I've seen what we had to become to stop them. If I can help find a balance, a way to defend ourselves without losing what makes us human in the first place, then yes, I'll accept." Athena nodded, the targeting systems in her eyes dimming slightly as she shifted to a more conversational mode. Darius would have approved. He always said the point of our existence wasn't just to fight, but to ensure there would be something worth fighting for afterward. Around them, the other giants were being greeted by families, normal-sized humans looking up at the Titans with mixtures of pride, love, and lingering disbelief. One particularly enormous soldier knelt down to gently embrace a small child who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "His daughter," Athena explained, following Ilara's gaze. "She barely recognizes him now, but she knows he's still her father." The sight crystallized something in Ilara's mind, the strange dichotomy of what humanity had become. On one side, peaceful colonists who wanted nothing more than to build and grow. On the other, giants who had sacrificed their humanity to protect that peace. "The Sirens will return eventually," Athena said, her voice low. "They don't forgive defeat, but next time, we'll be ready from the beginning." As if to emphasize this point, a group of new recruits marched through a distant doorway, candidates for the next generation of the Colossus program. They were already tall and strong by normal human standards, but they looked at the giants with determined expressions, knowing what transformation awaited them. "Will it be enough?" Ilara asked, watching them. "Can we maintain this balance? Peaceful colonies protected by warriors bred for war." Athena rose to her full height, towering over the hangar deck. "That, Commander, is the question we must all answer together. But today, humanity endures, and sometimes survival is victory enough." In the space beyond Fortress Alpha, the stars shone with the same light they always had. But to anyone watching, human or alien, their meaning had changed. These weren't just the lights of distant suns. They were beacons marking the domain of a species that would not go quietly into extinction. The message echoed across the cosmos. If you threaten humanity's children, humanity will send its giants to meet you. And next time, they would not be caught unprepared.